I'm going to expand upon the note referring to the ugly. In this one, I'm going to illustrate a bit further some of their features, some of their qualities, so people can identify it better and make better sense of it. I think especially in a time, in modern times, where things are more interconnected, it's important to understand ugly because good and bad are fairly well understood, but ugly has not been defined well enough to address it for the most part. That's why there have been trends and patterns that have emerged over time that society has had a difficult time addressing. So I'll give a couple examples here. In understanding ugly, it's important to make sense of the disturbed psychology behind being afflicted or feeling or believing oneself to be afflicted, because unlike bad doesn't find itself to be like afflicted or something that it needs to constantly seek some cure of itself for. So the objectives of ugly is largely based on itself trying to unugly itself. Now, for everyone else, that can be kind of difficult to understand. For good and bad, that's a difficult concept. Like people in the world who are operating from a space of good or bad, it can be difficult to understand because a lot of the psychology behind good and bad is not a disturbed psychology of the afflicted or the believed to be afflicted, someone who is constantly reflecting from that space and operating from that space is very different from those who are good and or bad. One example of how this is such as the vocal minority effect. Especially in the internet times, that has been a pattern that has reoccurred. So much so it's a fairly common term now in society, vocal minority. This wasn't quite so defined or present prior to the internet becoming more popular and involved in human life. The idea behind the vocal minority, oftentimes as we've seen it, at least in recent years, is a group that really works like miserably, tirelessly, relentlessly, and toward these disturbed kind of ideals or concepts, these disturbed values and beliefs. It's interesting because on one side, those disturbed set of values and beliefs can garner a despicable feeling out of people. It can garner great disdain and contempt because it's so obviously like disturbed and could come off as like this pitiful, weak thing that doesn't seem warranted, doesn't seem justifiable. On the other hand, it can garner sympathy. Like both the disdain toward the disturbed psychology and the sympathy are both wasted on the ugly. But yeah, the sympathy can be garnered because the viewpoint can be, oh, these are just a disturbed group and they just misunderstand something. Like it seems like something that can be remedied by maybe giving a good rationalization. I mean, giving maybe discourse can be enough. Just opening up the discourse, opening up a conversation and helping someone to understand what they don't understand, right? But in both cases, those different feelings that can be generated in response to their disturbed psychology are all wasted. That's all a bunch of wasted energy. It really doesn't ever go anywhere. It's been a common thing to see the vocal minority constantly press issues that the outcome to the issues that they press as the collective ugly. The outcome tends to just be dysfunction and deformity and like mutation. And so it's kind of like a group that continuously generates more arbitrary things because fundamentally ugly is like connected to the concept of garbage, of waste. So their byproduct, what they tend to generate is waste. Just more and more waste. And it's interesting that the presence of ugly, I would say, also seemed to parallel a larger discussion about something like pollution, which is also a concept around waste. But anyways, I'll give another example. Fast food, or let's say the restaurant industry. Now in New York, it's interesting because in a lot of places, there have been seen to be a underlying dysfunction. Like at least the reputation of fast food has changed a lot because there seems to be a disturbed set of values behind it. And it seems like unsolvable. You'd look and say, well, even a restaurant that seems like it has a good grade, they're supposed to have health inspections, everything's supposed to be up to code. And so when you see that grade, in front of a restaurant, you're supposed to be able to trust that you're supposed to feel safe consuming that food. But in the internet age, we've seen the ugliness of poor conditions in those kitchens and food storage. And the idea that all of that slips past the inspection is a disturbance. And it comes from a disturbed psychology. And so while good and bad are trying to throw these different solutions or address these in their own different ways for their own objectives, nothing really gets done except more waste, more garbage, more dysfunction. And so these are just some illustrations. Despite whatever area it is, if people understand to address it by the methods of beauty, then I know that people collectively, society will see great changes in the management of ugliness and the reduction of ugliness.